While COVID-19 remains a part of our everyday life, Generic Theater Company will continue to adapt for the sake of live theater. Overall, theater goers and Generic board members alike say they are happy to see the return of live musical theater. For GWU News, this is Miranda Nazzaro. As of March 1st, DC no longer requires restaurants and other businesses to require vaccines or masks before allowing patrons inside. We spoke with GW student Henry Long, who said he agreed with the government's decision. However, he had hesitation about lifting the vaccine mandate. Abbas says the conflict between ISK and the Taliban comes down to old ethnic rivalries between Pashtun and non-Pashtun communities. In Abbas's words, the ISK is doing to the Taliban what the Taliban did to Afghanistan. As for the future of GW Pop, the organization is planning student-run fashion shows in which students will model secondhand clothing to promote the organization. This is Miranda Nazzaro with District Daily. At GW, there are few affordable options for students who want to shop sustainably. Enter GW Pop, a student-run startup looking to change the way students fill their closets. They created an accessible pop-up thrift store to encourage environmentally friendly habits in their community. Co-founder Rachel Cohen realized her peers had a lack of knowledge about how to implement sustainability into the GW college lifestyle. She saw a need for change.
One thing we've learned is that creating a circular economy is one way to combat climate change as well as just your carbon footprint. And so we're like, well, is there any secondhand thrifting or anything like that in DC? And there really isn't.
Cohen says there are retail stores nearby that sell sustainably produced clothes.
And that's great, and it's a great practice if you can do it, but like on a college student budget, you can't.
After months of consumer research and preparation, GW Pop officially launched in the fall 2021 semester. Co-founder Maya Levine says Pop collects inventory through student donations, local thrift stores, and a wholesale buyer.
POP stands for Power of the Purse, which is referencing the historic use of the term, but we're co-opting the term POP in order to talk about consumers feeling empowered to use the power of their purse for good, for larger causes.
Collaborating with student organization GW Compost, students are able to drop off their compost and donate clothes on Friday mornings.
Because there's going to be an intersection of people who are dropping off compost and dropping off clothing. And even if there's not, at least they're starting to become informed and exposed to this other sustainable habit of like waste reduction or textile waste reduction.
Levine used to store everything in her dorm room, but now the Innovation Center in Tompkins Hall serves as GW Pop's headquarters. Sitting next to engineering projects, the team evaluates and prices hundreds of items.
I'm really interested in actively and creatively engaging the public, other people, my peers in environmental information in ways that's just not a lecture.
Thousands of students came to their 3 pop-ups last semester, and GW Pop plans on holding 3 more pop-ups in the spring. As for the future of GW Pop, the organization is planning student-run fashion shows in which students will model secondhand clothing to promote the organization. This is Miranda Nazzaro with District Daily. This weekend, Generic Theater Company will bring back live theater with their production of Bonnie and Clyde, their first full-length musical since November of 2019. I'm here at the West Hall Black Box Theater, where the cast of 13 will perform the American classic, even amongst COVID precautions. Excitement is in the air as Generic debuts their performance after a 2-month rehearsal process. With that excitement comes new responsibility to ensure the safety of the cast and directing team. Senior Alex Mamalian, one of the co-finance directors for Generic, says one of the biggest adjustments for the company is the new unmasked performance agreement they must follow.
I think with the unmasked performer agreement, we have to have the audience 6 feet away from all the performers at all times so that the performers can perform without masks on. And so that greatly affects the number of audience members we can have every night. So from the financial side, definitely figuring out ticketing and how that impacts how many people we can have seeing the show every night.
Mamalian says they were able to fit up to 57 audience members in the space compared to the normal 75 or 80 allowed in past productions. Although COVID brings an additional stress, Mamalian says it's worth it to be able to participate in theater.
Being able to kind of escape from some of the stressors. We've been waiting for live theater to come back for so long, so it's just been so nice to have that as a stress reliever.
The unmasked performer agreement also comes with a new role titled COVID Safety Officer to monitor COVID results from members of both the cast and generic board. Rohan Modi, Generic's co-president, took on this role this past week.
Part of the unmasked performer agreement, all of our performers, to be able to perform in the shows unmasked, have to be regularly tested for COVID-19.
For Daniel Niewiner, the director of Bonnie and Clyde, the overall show was transformed once the actors were able to remove their masks for the final week of rehearsal. Prior to this, they were required to keep them on at all times in accordance with university policy.
I had very little concept of what that show was going to look like without masks until they took them off. I didn't know if anything was going on below the face. That being said, I do think it resulted in a better product because we really had to bring up the larger-than-life aspects of the entire rest of their performance. They couldn't just, in the black box, because it's so personal, you can really rely on your face. But they didn't get to because we didn't see their face. I had to direct the rest of their body.
While COVID-19 remains a part of our everyday life, Generic Theater Company will continue to adapt for the sake of live theater. Overall, theater goers and Generic board members alike say they are happy to see the return of live musical theater. For GWU News, this is Miranda Nazzaro. After nearly 3 months since the Taliban's takeover of the Afghanistan government, the implications of their rule are setting within Southwest Asia. A recent event hosted by the George Washington University's Institute for Middle East Studies met to discuss the new Taliban rule and what this means for their ongoing rival with the Islamic State in Khorasan, better known as ISK. A distinguished professor of international relations at the Near East South Asia Strategic Studies Center, Dr. Abbas's research focuses on countering political and religious extremism in developing states. Abbas believes one of the largest impacts of the Afghan government collapse is potential for greater conflict between the Taliban and ISK.
They were able to stage a comeback against all odds. This is very empowering for all religious extremists in broader Southwest Asia.
According to the Institute for Economics and Peace's Global Terrorism Index, ISK became one of the top 4 deadliest terrorist organizations in 2018. ISK was responsible for the August attack at the Kabul airport, which left at least 100 people dead and 13 U.S. troops. Abbas says ISK is a danger to the Taliban, and the Taliban's comeback further inspires ISK. Abbas says the conflict between ISK and the Taliban comes down to old ethnic rivalries between Pashtun and non-Pashtun communities. In Abbas's words, the ISK is doing to the Taliban what the Taliban did to Afghanistan.
Why are those former Afghan soldiers and officials joining ISK? Many of them are non-Pashtun.
During the Q&A session, various audience members asked about Afghan sentiment towards the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan after 20 years.
The minority, and especially people on the north who were non-Pashtuns, I think they saw United States in a positive light because U.S. had helped them get rid of Taliban in 2001.
Abbas says the American presence and investment was very important to the middle class and the northern non-Pashtuns.
However, for the south and the Pashtun-dominated areas, and many others also who wanted more independent government, for instance, for whom outside intervention or presence was problematic.
Dr. William Youmans, an associate professor at George Washington School of Media and Public Affairs, believes international news media does not encompass the full scope of views within Afghanistan.
Afghanistan's a bigger country than a few cities, and the Taliban had been, ruling in the provinces for many years now. And
while viewers saw mobs of people trying to flee, Youmans points out some Afghans wanted the U.S. out.
This is a big change, but the story of change is coming from people who live in a few cities, and they're the ones who have a louder voice in our media sphere, and so we don't actually get a full picture of what's happening all around Afghanistan.
For Afghans living under the Taliban, it remains to be seen whether the Taliban will be able to bring safety and security to the country. This is Miranda Nazzaro with GWU News.